He thought the shutdown would destroy only profits that morning, but he had no idea it was about to expose the arrogance of an entire room. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to Claire Bennett. The manufacturing floor of Titan Aero Systems usually roared like a living storm. Conveyor belts moved in perfect rhythm, robotic arms swung with measured precision, and the deep hum of test engines shook the polished concrete beneath every pair of boots in the building. But at 8:17 that Monday morning, the sound vanished. Silence spread across the 80,000-square-foot facility like a power outage in the middle of a city. Red warning lights flashed above Assembly Line 3. Computer screens filled with error codes. Supervisors barked into radios. Somewhere in the distance, a forklift stopped so abruptly its tires squealed. Every minute the line remained down was costing the company nearly $8,000. By the hour, losses would pass $500,000, and everyone in the building knew it. In the glass-walled control room overlooking the floor, 10 engineers surrounded a central monitor like doctors losing a patient. They wore pressed shirts, company badges, and expressions sharpened by panic. Ethan Cole, lead systems engineer, loosened his tie and rubbed both temples. At 42, Ethan had built a reputation on solving impossible problems under pressure. Today, pressure was winning. Run diagnostics again, he snapped. We already did, one engineer answered. Then run them better. Fingers raced across keyboards. Another engineer crawled beneath a console to inspect wiring. A third called corporate support in Dallas. No answers came. The machine that powered the line, a custom turbine calibration unit worth $6 million, remained dark and motionless. Outside the control room, employees gathered in anxious clusters. Some stared upward through the glass, hoping genius would appear. Others whispered about canceled shipments, angry clients, and whether overtime would suddenly become unemployment. Then, moving quietly through the crowd, came Claire Bennett. She wore a gray maintenance uniform, plain work shoes, and a name badge scratched from years of use. A yellow caution cart rolled beside her with cleaning supplies neatly arranged. At 36, Claire had the calm face of someone who had learned not to compete with noise. Most people noticed her only when floors were shining. She paused near the dead machine and listened, not to the shouting, not to the alarms, to the silence between them. Her blue eyes narrowed slightly. Ethan stormed out of the control room and nearly collided with her cart. Can someone move this out of the way? He barked. We're dealing with an emergency. Claire steadied the cart with one hand. I know, she said softly. Ethan gave a short laugh, without humor. Then you know now is not the time. Claire glanced past him at the stalled unit. Actually, she said, her voice so calm it almost disappeared beneath the flashing alarms. I think I know what's wrong with it. For half a second, no one moved. Then laughter broke out from two younger engineers near the doorway. One pulled out his phone. Another shook his head and smirked. Ethan slowly turned back toward her, disbelief hardening into amusement. You, he asked. The janitorial staff thinks they can diagnose a $6 million system? Claire did not react. Her hands remained folded on the cart handle. I didn't say diagnose, she replied. I said I know what's wrong. The room went strangely quiet. Somewhere overhead, a warning light kept blinking red against the glass. And for the first time that morning, Ethan Cole felt something he refused to name. Ethan Cole let the laughter continue for a few seconds because it served him. It reminded everyone in the room who belonged near the machines and who did not. He folded his arms and leaned against the control console with the relaxed confidence of a man who believed authority was the same thing as competence. All right, he said loudly enough for the entire floor to hear. Since we apparently have hidden experts in maintenance now, let us all learn something. A few nervous chuckles followed. Phones lifted higher. Claire Bennett remained still beside her caution card, her expression unreadable. The flashing red alarm reflected softly across the polished floor near her shoes. I am not trying to embarrass anyone, she said. Then you chose the wrong morning, Ethan replied. Do you have any idea what this unit does? Claire looked through the glass toward the silent turbine calibration system. Yes, she said. It balances thermal variance before final output alignment. If it does not stabilize within tolerance, the whole line locks itself. The nearest engineer stopped smiling. Ethan's jaw tightened for the smallest moment, but he recovered quickly. Anyone can memorize words from a manual. Claire said nothing. She simply turned her eyes back to the machine, as if the conversation itself was the least interesting thing in the room. Behind Ethan, one of the younger engineers whispered, "How would she know that?" Another answered, "Lucky guess." Ethan straightened. "Fine. Since you know so much, tell us what 10 licensed engineers missed." Claire took a slow breath. "You are searching software because the screens are screaming. But the problem is mechanical." Several heads turned toward the dead unit. Ethan laughed again, though it sounded thinner now. "Mechanical? We inspected the housing." "You inspected what was easy to reach," Claire replied. "Not what is failing." The room went quiet enough for the distant beeping alarms to sound suddenly louder. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Listen carefully. We are under contract pressure, executive review, and client deadlines. This is not a game." Claire met his stare without hostility. "I know. That is why you should stop wasting time." A murmur rippled through the employees outside the glass wall. Even those who could not hear every word could feel the shift in the room. Confidence had begun to leak from one side and gather around the other. Ethan noticed it too. Pride can hear danger long before reason does. "All right," he said sharply. "You think you know the answer? Show us." One engineer muttered, "Ethan," but he silenced him with a glance. Claire did not move immediately. Instead, she removed a pair of simple work gloves from her pocket and pulled them on with calm precision. The gesture was so practiced, so natural, that several people exchanged looks. This was not the movement of someone playing pretend. This was muscle memory. She stepped past Ethan and approached the locked panel at the side of the turbine unit. "That section is restricted," an engineer protested. "No," Claire said softly. "That section is ignored." She crouched near the lower access plate and placed 2 fingers against the metal. Her eyes closed for 1 second. Then she tapped twice near a seam no one else had noticed. "There," she said. "The vibration is wrong." Ethan stared at her. "You can hear vibration through steel?" Claire rose slowly. "You used to be able to hear it too," she said. "Before titles got louder than machines." No one laughed this time. Somewhere in the back, a phone lowered. Ethan felt heat rise in his face. "Get her a wrench," he ordered, trying to sound in control. Claire extended her hand without looking at him. "Half-inch socket," she said. "And if you have any sense left, bring it quickly." The room obeyed before Ethan could. The half-inch socket reached Claire Bennett before Ethan Cole could speak again. That alone told the room more than anyone wanted to admit. People obeyed confidence instinctively, and hers had arrived without noise. Claire caught the tool in one hand, crouched beside the lower access plate, and examined 6 bolts arranged in a circle around a brushed steel cover no larger than a dinner plate. "We already checked that compartment," one engineer said from behind the crowd. Claire did not look up. "No," she replied calmly. "You opened it. Checking requires understanding what you are seeing." A hush fell across the control room. Even the employees outside the glass leaned closer. Claire loosened the bolts in a cross pattern, steady and efficient, as if she had done it hundreds of times before. Ethan noticed that detail and disliked the feeling it gave him. The bolts came free. She lifted the panel and set it carefully on the floor. Inside, a narrow chamber revealed belts, sensors, and a compact rotating shaft connected to the turbine calibration arm. Nothing looked damaged. Several engineers exchanged relieved smirks. Ethan seized the moment. "Well," he asked, "I assume the miracle is about to begin." Claire ignored the tone. She bent closer and listened, not with dramatic flair, but with the concentration of someone reading a familiar language. Then she reached into the compartment and lightly touched the housing beside the shaft. Her fingers paused. "Temperature is wrong," she murmured. "The monitor shows normal range," Ethan said immediately. "The monitor is reading where it is convenient," Claire answered. "Not where it matters." She pointed toward a small recessed channel hidden behind a bundle of wiring. "Flashlight." No one moved for a second. Then an engineer handed her one. She shined the beam into the narrow space. There, barely visible, was a sliver of metallic debris lodged near the microsensor wheel. It was no bigger than a thumbnail. "Impossible," someone whispered. Claire extended 2 fingers, then stopped. "Needle nose pliers." They appeared in her hand almost instantly. Ethan felt the room slipping from him one silent act at a time. Claire carefully extracted the tiny shard and held it beneath the light. A fragment of machined steel glinted between the jaws of the tool. "This broke from the last replacement bracket," she said. It drifted inward, interfered with the sensor timing, then overheated the shaft. She placed the fragment in Ethan's palm. "Your software was reporting symptoms." She looked directly at him. This was the cause. Ethan stared at the metal piece as though it had insulted him personally. "That does not prove the line restarts," he said. "No," Claire replied. "That part comes next." She cleaned the sensor wheel with a cloth from her cart, adjusted the alignment ring by less than an inch, then resealed the panel and tightened the bolts in the same cross pattern. Every motion was exact. No hesitation. No wasted movement. One of the younger engineers swallowed hard. "Who is she?" No one answered. Claire stood, removed her gloves, and handed the socket back. "Reset the sequence," she said. Ethan did not move. Pride can become heavy when everyone is watching. Finally, another engineer rushed to the console and entered the restart command. Screens flickered. Warning lights paused. For 3 long seconds, nothing happened. Then a deep mechanical rumble rolled through the floor. The turbine unit spun to life. Green indicators flashed across every monitor. Conveyor belts restarted one by one. Robotic arms resumed their programmed dance. Somewhere on the factory floor, workers erupted into cheers. Through the glass walls, people clapped, laughed, and stared upward in disbelief. Inside the control room, no one spoke. Ethan slowly lifted his eyes from the steel fragment to Claire Bennett. She was already wiping a grease mark from her wrist with a paper towel. "You just got lucky," he said weakly. Claire gave the smallest smile. "Luck does not tighten bolts in sequence," she replied. "Training does." The room went silent again. The cheers from the factory floor rose like a wave, then slowly faded when people realized the most important sound in the building was not celebration, but silence inside the control room. 10 engineers stood around glowing monitors that were now perfectly healthy, while the woman they had mocked folded her gloves and placed them back into her pocket. Claire Bennett looked less like a conqueror than someone finishing an ordinary chore. That made the moment harder to swallow. Ethan Cole forced a smile that reached nowhere near his eyes. "All right," he said, clapping once with stiff palms. "Nice catch. Good instincts." He spoke the way people do when they want credit for surviving someone else's success. Claire picked up her caution card handle. "It was not instinct," she said. "It was design tolerance and vibration drift." A few younger engineers glanced at one another. Ethan heard it too. Those were not casual words. Those were the words of someone who understood the machine from the inside out. "You seem to know a surprising amount for someone in facilities," he said. Claire shrugged. Lightly. "People often confuse job titles with limits." She turned to leave, but the control room doors opened before she could take a second step. A woman in a Navy executive suit entered with 2 managers behind her. Her silver badge identified her immediately. Laura Whitaker, Chief Operations Officer. She had the sharp posture of someone who measured time in millions of dollars and had no patience for waste. "I was told line 3 is back online," she said, scanning the room. "Who fixed it?" Ethan stepped forward instantly. "My team isolated the fault and coordinated the restart." He said it smoothly, almost gracefully. Years of practice had made dishonesty sound polished. Claire said nothing. She simply stood beside her cart. Laura's eyes moved across the room, reading faces the way accountants read numbers. She noticed the discomfort, the lowered gazes, the phone still recording in one engineer's hand. "Interesting," she said. "Then why is no one looking at you?" Ethan's smile thinned. It was a collaborative effort. One of the younger engineers swallowed hard. Another looked at Claire, then at the floor. Laura followed the movement. "Ms. Bennett," she said, reading the badge. "Do you have something to add?" Claire answered with the same calm voice she had used all morning. "Only that the sensor chamber should be inspected weekly now. The bracket alloy is shedding under heat stress. If it is not replaced, the problem returns in 30 to 40 days." Laura's expression changed by a fraction. Real authority recognizes competence quickly. "How would you know the bracket cycle?" Claire reached into the side pocket of her cart and removed a folded notepad. She opened to a page filled with dates, observations, and handwritten maintenance notes. "Because it has happened 3 times in 14 months, she said. No one asked why. Laura took the notepad and read silently. The room waited. Ethan felt sweat gathering beneath his collar. These notes were never submitted through engineering, he said quickly. Claire looked at him. I submitted them every time. She paused. To engineering. The words landed like steel. Laura slowly closed the notepad. Mr. Cole, she said, did your department ignore recurring field reports from maintenance? Ethan straightened. We receive hundreds of minor comments every quarter. It is impossible to review every scribble on a janitorial pad. The room flinched at the sentence. Even he seemed to realize too late how ugly it sounded. Laura handed the notepad back to Claire. That janitorial pad just saved this company $500,000 before lunch. She turned to Ethan. My office. In 10 minutes. No one moved after she left. Ethan stood frozen beside the glowing monitors he had failed to revive. Claire gently adjusted the mop handle on her cart. Then she began walking toward the door. Ms. Bennett, one engineer called nervously. How did you know where to look? Claire paused without turning around. Because when something stops working, she said, I start with what everyone important ignored. Then she walked out, and the room went silent once more. By noon, Titan Aero Systems was running at full speed again, but productivity was no longer the thing people talked about. Word had moved faster than the conveyor belts. Forklift drivers repeated the story near loading docks. Accountants whispered it in the cafeteria line. Assembly workers replayed shaky phone footage showing Claire Bennett kneeling beside the dead machine, while 10 engineers stood behind her like confused spectators. In every version of the story, one detail stayed the same. She had never raised her voice. Claire, meanwhile, was on the second-floor hallway polishing the chrome trim outside Conference Room B. Her caution sign stood neatly beside the wall. A radio clipped to her cart played soft country music at low volume. If she noticed that half the building now stared when she passed, she gave no sign of it. Some people chase attention. Others know it always arrives late. The conference room door opened suddenly. Ethan Cole stepped out first, his tie loosened, jaw tense, eyes fixed straight ahead. Behind him came Laura Whitaker and 2 human resources directors carrying folders. Ethan did not look at Claire as he walked past, but humiliation has a posture everyone recognizes. Laura stopped beside the cart. Ms. Bennett, she said. Claire turned off the radio. Yes, ma'am. Do you have 10 minutes? Claire considered the damp cloth in her hand, then folded it neatly over the cart handle. I can make 10 minutes. Inside Conference Room B, sunlight stretched across a long walnut table. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the plant she had quietly walked through for 3 years. Laura gestured toward a chair. Please sit. Claire remained standing for a moment, then sat carefully, as if unused to furniture chosen for executives. One of the human resources directors opened a folder. We reviewed your employment file, he said. It appears there are missing records. Claire gave a small smile. Only the ones no one asked for. Laura slid a second folder across the table. Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Mechanical Engineering. Graduated top of class. Stanford Graduate Research Fellowship. Former lead systems consultant at Halberd Dynamics. She looked up slowly. Why are you cleaning hallways in my company? Claire rested her hands in her lap. Because hallways are honest. They only need to be cleaned once you admit they are dirty. No one spoke for a second. Then Laura leaned back, studying her more carefully. That is not an answer. Claire looked through the window toward Assembly Line 3. 5 years ago, my husband got sick. I left consulting to care for him. After he passed, I did not want airports, conferences, or people competing to sound important. I wanted quiet work. Predictable work. Work that ended when the shift ended. The room softened. Even corporate people recognize grief when it is spoken plainly. And Titan? Laura asked. I needed health insurance and something close to home. She paused. Then I noticed your engineers kept ignoring maintenance reports. One human resources director coughed into his hand to hide a laugh. Laura did not. You could have come directly to management. I submitted notes through the proper channels, Claire said. Repeatedly. Laura nodded once. She already knew the truth of that. Mr. Cole has been placed on administrative leave pending review, she said. Several others will be reassigned. Claire's expression did not change. I did not come here for revenge. Good, Laura replied. Because I am not offering revenge. She opened a third folder and turned it toward Claire. Inside was a fresh badge request and a printed title line. Senior Reliability Advisor. Claire read it without touching the paper. You are offering noise, she said quietly. Laura smiled for the first time that day. I am offering authority to fix what has been ignored. Claire looked back out the window where machines moved in perfect rhythm below. For years, she had walked unnoticed among problems no one wanted to see. Now the door to that silence stood open. One condition, she said. Maintenance gets a seat at every engineering meeting. Laura extended her hand across the table. Done. Claire shook it once, firmly, and somewhere beyond the glass, the factory kept running on time. The next morning, Titan Aero Systems felt like the same building only on paper. The walls were the same steel gray. The machines still thundered in measured rhythm. Coffee still burned in the break room pot by 6:30. But something invisible had shifted. People now looked up when Claire Bennett walked by. Some nodded awkwardly. Others stepped aside as if making room for a person they had failed to recognize while she stood beside them for years. Respect often arrives wearing embarrassment. At 8 a.m., conference room A filled with engineers, supervisors, maintenance leads, and department managers for the first cross-operation strategy meeting in company history. The invitation itself had caused whispers all night. Maintenance had never been invited before unless something was broken. Today, they had front-row seats. Claire entered wearing a navy blazer, plain slacks, and the new badge Laura Whitaker had authorized less than 12 hours earlier. Senior Reliability Advisor. The title looked polished. Claire looked exactly the same. She carried a yellow legal pad and 2 sharpened pencils. No laptop. No dramatic entrance. Conversations lowered the moment she stepped inside. Laura stood at the head of the table. Good morning, she said. Today we begin fixing more than machines. Her eyes moved briefly toward Claire, then to the rest of the room. We built silos, rewarded ego, and ignored information because it came from the wrong uniform. That ends now. No one challenged her. Yesterday had removed appetite for arrogance. Claire took a seat midway down the table rather than near the front. One maintenance technician smiled quietly at seeing one of their own in a place where polished shoes once mattered more than practical knowledge. The meeting began with production reports, delayed shipments, and recovery schedules. Then Laura nodded to Claire. Your floor. Claire stood slowly and walked to the screen. She clipped her legal pad pages onto the projector tray. Handwritten charts appeared across the wall, bearing failures, heat cycles, repeat sensor drift, cleaning schedule conflicts, response lag times by department. Several engineers straightened in surprise. The data was detailed, organized, and brutally clear. These are from the last 18 months, Claire said. Most were preventable. Nearly all were reported. She tapped one column with a pencil. Average time to acknowledge a maintenance warning was 16 days. She tapped another. Average time to blame maintenance after failure was 14 minutes. A few people laughed before realizing they should not. Laura did not hide her smile. One engineer raised his hand carefully. Why keep records if no one listened? Claire answered without sarcasm. Because truth does not expire when ignored. The room fell still. She continued. This company loses money in expensive ways because it dismisses cheap wisdom. Dust buildup, loose brackets, worn seals, staff who notice patterns but stop reporting them when no one listens. She looked around the room. Machines are honest. People are where complexity begins. Near the far end of the table sat Daniel Reeves, one of Ethan Cole's longtime allies. He adjusted his glasses. With respect, field observations are useful, but engineering decisions require advanced training. Claire nodded once. Agreed. Then she handed him a folder. Please solve page 3. Daniel opened it confidently. His expression changed within seconds. It was a vibration model with tolerance corrections. Handwritten in elegant notation. This is graduate-level systems math, he said quietly. Claire returned to the front. Yes. It is also the equation behind the issue we had yesterday. No one moved. Daniel closed the folder. I stand corrected. Good, Claire said gently. Correction is cheaper than failure. The room released a breath it did not know it was holding. By the end of the meeting, action plans were approved, reporting lines rebuilt, and weekly mixed team inspections scheduled. Maintenance would now walk the floor beside engineering, not behind them. As chairs pushed back and people gathered papers, Laura spoke one final sentence. For years we hired talent and ignored wisdom. Starting today, we intend to notice both. Claire collected her pencils, tucked the legal pad under one arm, and headed for the door. A young engineer hurried after her. "Ms. Bennett," he said, almost out of breath. "Would you be willing to mentor me?" Claire studied his nervous face, then smiled faintly. "Only if you are willing to listen to people who wear name tags different from yours." He nodded at once. "Then meet me on the floor at 6 tomorrow," she said. "Real lessons start where the noise is." 3 weeks later, Titan Aerosystems had numbers no one could argue with. Downtime was down 32%. Emergency repair costs had fallen by nearly $400,000. Production targets were ahead of schedule for the first time that quarter. But the most dramatic change could not be measured on spreadsheets. People had started listening to one another. Maintenance reports were answered the same day. Engineers walked the floor instead of studying it from glass offices. Supervisors asked questions before assigning blame. Culture, like machinery, runs smoother when friction is reduced. Claire Bennett became the center of that quiet shift without ever trying to be. She still arrived before sunrise with black coffee in a plain travel mug. She still carried pencils instead of expensive tablets. She still preferred the noise of the production floor over conference room applause. Yet wherever she stopped, people gathered. A welder wanted advice on recurring heat cracks. A scheduler asked how to reduce line bottlenecks. Young engineers requested 5 minutes and usually stayed for 50. Claire answered each person the same way, calmly, directly, without trying to impress anyone. One Thursday morning, Laura Whitaker called an all-hands meeting in the main assembly bay. Nearly 200 employees formed rows between suspended engine frames and tool stations. Forklifts were parked. Conveyor lines paused. Even the loudest machines seemed to wait. Laura stepped onto a portable platform with a microphone. "I know most company meetings waste time," she began. Laughter moved through the crowd. "This one intends to repay some." She reviewed the improved numbers, the recovered contracts, and praise from clients who had nearly walked away. Then she gestured toward Claire, who stood near the back hoping not to be noticed. "There is one more matter." Heads turned immediately. Claire looked mildly disappointed that hiding had failed. Laura continued, "When leadership ignores truth because of where it comes from, companies fail in expensive ways. We learned that lesson from one person who never stopped caring, even when no one listened." She held up a framed plaque, but the crowd was already applauding before anyone read it. Claire remained still as eyes and smiles moved toward her from every direction. "Please come up here, Ms. Bennett." Claire walked forward through a corridor of clapping coworkers. Some were the same people who once passed her without seeing her. She seemed less triumphant than slightly inconvenienced by stares. Laura handed her the plaque. It read, "Excellence in Integrity and Innovation." Beneath it, smaller letters, "For fixing more than machines." The room applauded louder. Claire looked at the plaque, then at the crowd. "It is heavier than I expected," she said. Laughter broke the tension instantly. Laura handed her the microphone. "Say something wise," she whispered. Claire considered that request as if it were mildly unreasonable. Then she faced the room. "Most breakdowns begin long before alarms go off," she said. The bay fell silent. A bolt loosened slowly. Dust gathers quietly. A person gets ignored one conversation at a time. No one moved. If you want things to last, pay attention early. She looked across the rows of workers, engineers, clerks, and supervisors standing side by side. And if someone close to the problem keeps speaking, listen before the machine has to scream. The silence that followed was not empty. It was respect settling into place. Then applause returned like thunder. Near the front stood Ethan Cole. He had returned in a reduced advisory role after disciplinary review, stripped of authority but not employment. Pride had become humility the expensive way. He waited until the crowd thinned, then approached Claire holding a paper cup of coffee he clearly did not know what to do with. "I owe you an apology," he said. Claire studied him for a moment. "Yes," she answered. Ethan nodded. "I judged you by the wrong things." "Most people do," Claire said. "The useful ones stop once they notice." He gave a small, embarrassed laugh. "Can we start over?" Claire glanced toward the floor where teams were already restarting the line together. "We already did," she said. "The day you learned to listen." Then she handed the microphone back to Laura, tucked the plaque under one arm, and walked toward the sound of work beginning again. 2 months after the morning that changed everything, Titan Aerosystems received a visitor no one had expected. The Department of Defense audit team arrived unannounced just after 9 o'clock, carrying clipboards, security badges, and the kind of calm expressions that make executives nervous. Federal contracts worth tens of millions of dollars depended on what they found that day. Laura Whitaker met them in the lobby with polished confidence, but even she knew surprise inspections had ruined stronger companies than hers. News traveled through the building in minutes. Workstations straightened. Desks became cleaner than usual. Conversations turned careful. In the engineering wing, people reopened procedures they should have memorized months ago. On the production floor, however, Claire Bennett kept walking beside line 2 with a flashlight and notepad, checking wheel housings and listening to bearings. Panic was loud. Competence stayed busy. The lead auditor, Thomas Mercer, spent the morning reviewing safety logs, maintenance records, and response times. He asked short questions and accepted no polished speeches. By noon, his team entered the main assembly bay to inspect live operations. Laura accompanied them with 2 managers and Daniel Reeves, who now served as engineering liaison. As they approached line 2, Mercer paused near Claire, who was kneeling beside a compressor panel with grease on one glove. "Excuse me," he said. "Can you tell me where I can find the person responsible for preventive reliability oversight?" Claire looked up. "Depends," she said. "Do you want the person with the title or the person doing it?" Daniel nearly choked, trying not to laugh. Mercer's mouth twitched. "Which one are you?" "Usually both before lunch," Claire replied. Laura stepped forward. "Mr. Mercer, this is Claire Bennett, our senior reliability advisor." Mercer studied her for a second longer than most people did. "Bennett," he repeated. "Did you formerly consult on adaptive turbine calibration systems?" Claire rose slowly. "A long time ago." Mercer extended his hand immediately. "Then we have met through your work, even if not in person. My previous agency used one of your fault prevention models." Daniel stared openly. Laura looked delighted by information she had not known. Claire shook Mercer's hand with mild reluctance. "That model was supposed to be retired." "Good engineering ages better than policy," Mercer said. The room grew noticeably quieter. Mercer then asked to see the company's failure response process in real time. Fate, which enjoys timing, answered instantly. A warning chime sounded from the far end of the bay. One of the coolant feed stations had halted mid-cycle. Operators stepped back. Several managers stiffened. Mercer glanced at Laura. "May I observe?" "Please," Laura said, trying to sound less concerned than she felt. Claire was already walking toward the station. She did not hurry. She never did. Crowds formed at a respectful distance as she inspected the panel, listened to the motor, then checked the floor drain beneath the unit. "Filter clog," Daniel said. Quickly, eager to contribute. Claire shook her head. "Secondary float sensor." She pointed to a clear tube half hidden behind the housing. Condensation trapped the switch. Mercer watched closely. Claire opened a small side latch, drained 3 ounces of water, reset the float, and restarted the station. Total time, 40 seconds. The machine resumed with a steady hum. No drama. No speeches. Just function restored. Mercer wrote something on his clipboard. "How often does she do that?" he asked quietly. Daniel answered before anyone else could. "Often enough that we stopped acting surprised." A few nearby workers smiled. The audit continued until late afternoon. When the team finally gathered in the conference room, Laura braced for a long list of findings. Mercer closed his folder and stood. "Your documentation is solid," he said. "Your operational recovery metrics are exceptional." He glanced toward Claire standing near the back wall, hoping once again not to be noticed. "But your strongest asset is cultural. Most firms protect hierarchy. You recently chose competence instead." He handed Laura the preliminary approval letter. "That decision likely saved this contract." After the auditors left, the room erupted in relieved applause. Claire quietly reached for the door. Laura called after her. "Where are you going now?" Claire held up her flashlight. "Line 4 sounds slightly annoyed." The room laughed, then fell into that familiar silence of admiration as she walked away. 6 months later, Titan Aero Systems looked nothing like the company Claire Bennett had quietly entered with a mop cart and a scratched name badge. Production had reached record levels. Safety incidents were down. Employee retention was the highest in company history. New contracts lined the walls of the executive suite in polished frames. But the transformation people talked about most was simpler than any statistic. People greeted one another by name now. Engineers thanked technicians. Supervisors asked janitors what they noticed during night shifts. Listening had become part of the machinery. Claire never seemed impressed by any of it. She still parked in the far lot beside second shift. Workers. She still brought lunch in the same plain container wrapped in a kitchen towel. She still carried pencils in her blazer pocket and preferred steel-toe shoes over polished heels. Titles had changed around her. Habits had not. On a bright Friday afternoon, Titan gathered employees in the main assembly bay for one final announcement before the holiday weekend. Banners hung from the rafters. Music played softly through overhead speakers. Families stood beside workers. Children pointed at suspended engine frames gleaming under warehouse lights. Laura Whitaker stepped to the microphone, smiling in a way the company had rarely seen before Claire arrived. "Today we celebrate numbers," she said. "But more importantly, we celebrate standards." Applause followed. She spoke of recovered contracts, bonuses, expanded health coverage, and a new apprenticeship program that would pay tuition for hourly workers seeking engineering degrees. Cheers rose at that. Then Laura lifted one hand for quiet. "There is one more announcement." She turned toward Claire, who was standing near a support column, hoping once again to remain background scenery. "Ms. Bennett, please join me." Laughter moved warmly through the crowd as Claire sighed with playful resignation and walked forward. Laura handed her a small velvet box. Claire opened it carefully. Inside was a silver company pin shaped like a turbine blade. Around the edge were engraved words, "Built by those who care." Claire looked up, genuinely speechless for perhaps the first time in the story. Laura smiled. "And beginning next month, our new training center will officially open." A curtain dropped from a banner above the bay entrance. It revealed large blue letters, "The Claire Bennett Institute for Reliability and Applied Engineering." For one full second, the building froze. Then applause exploded so loudly it echoed off steel beams high above them. Some workers whistled. Others wiped tears. Daniel Reeves laughed openly. Even Ethan Cole, now humbler and wiser in a technical support role, clapped the hardest of all. Claire stared at the sign, then at Laura. "You named a building after someone who still misplaces her keys," she said. The crowd laughed through their applause. Laura handed her the microphone. "Say something." Claire looked across hundreds of faces. Welders, engineers, custodians, office clerks, interns, managers, spouses, children. People who once worked near one another and now worked with one another. She took a breath. "I was never the smartest person in this building," she began. Murmurs of disbelief spread immediately. Claire smiled faintly. "I was just the one who kept paying attention." Silence settled with respect. Talent matters. Education matters. Experience matters. But none of them matter much if pride keeps your ears closed. She looked toward the back, where maintenance crews stood shoulder to shoulder. Some of the best answers in life arrive wearing the wrong uniform. The room went still enough to hear the lights hum overhead. So the next time someone quiet speaks, do not ask who they are before you listen. Ask whether they might be right. No one moved for a moment. Then the applause returned, stronger than before. Children ran toward the refreshment tables. Music rose again. Machines rested for the weekend. Claire handed back the microphone and stepped off the platform. Ethan approached with a small smile. "You know," he said, glancing at the giant banner overhead, "you could have taken my job." Claire adjusted the silver pin on her jacket. "I did something better," she replied. "I helped everyone do theirs." Then she walked into the crowd, where people parted not out of fear or status, but respect. And that day, the whole company remembered what dignity looks like.